Okay, Massive is was a company that was acquired by the Online Services Group in May 2006.
Uno, dos, tres. ¿Oye ahora? No, usted tiene que conectar el auricular.
Okay. Specifically, what we've created is the world's largest network of video games. What we are doing is we are establishing video games as a medium, so media buyers and planners can buy into video games as easily as they can television, print, online, and radio. To start, I'm going to show you a short video. The video is made up of about 8 or so video games, and all the advertising that you see within these video games has been dynamically served by Massive. And you'll have to excuse the sound, I think it will come out of the laptop. Okay. In order for Massive to be able to serve advertising into video games, we need to ensure that there is some form of internet connection. In terms of an internet connection, when you specifically look at the Spanish market, and this goes for the European market as well, everybody who owns an Xbox 360, 60% of those users have a connection through to the internet. Likewise on a PC. Across Europe, you're looking at between 50 and 80% connectivity on a PC. So what's really driving video games in the next couple of years? Microsoft on the Xbox 360, Sony on the PlayStation 3, and Nintendo on the Wii. And broadband connection is really driving sort of the next generation of sales. I think when you look at the internet 5 to 10 years ago and you look at dial-up modems versus broadband, the difference is exactly the same on video games. 5, 10 years ago, it was a single-player experience. Now, with broadband connection, several people are playing simultaneously. To give you an example, I've got a brother who lives in New York. I can sit in London and I can play FIFA on the Xbox 360, and I can play with him simultaneously online. We can see each other on the camera, and we can chat to each other on the speaker, and we can then send text messages and voicemail messages to one another. Video games over the next couple of years, notably in Europe, are one of the largest growing entertainment mediums around. When you look at the revenues generated from video games, they often surpass television and cinema as well. To give you an example, in the US, when Halo released, which is one of Microsoft's biggest game properties, Halo 2, it generated $200 million in its first weekend. That's more than any other movie in Hollywood history. Specifically in the UK, when Grand Theft Auto released, it generated more than Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings combined. The average video game today on a next generation console cost about $20 million to make. 3 years of people's lives, 300 to 500 members of staff, and orchestras recording the soundtracks. Specifically, when you look at Spain, there's 5.2 million active gamers in Spain at the moment. Just under 3 million of those are the elusive 10 to 34 male demographic. Specifically in Spain, the average male 18-year-old gamer plays 10.5 hours of video games a week. When you stack that up against other forms of traditional media, it comes fourth after television, music, and spending time with family and friends. Why are video games such a powerful entertainment medium? Firstly, the audience. An incredibly elusive, difficult to reach 13 to 34 male demographic. When you're watching television, you're multitasking. You're using the internet. You're chatting with friends. You're making dinner. When you're playing video games, you're completely immersed in this experience. Secondly, content. The average video game you play for about 25 to 30 hours over the first 6 months. Every time you play, you use a different character, you drive a different car, you have a completely different experience every time you play that video game. When you look at the movies, James Bond, for example, the recent Bond movie, you go to the cinema maybe for 2.5 hours, and perhaps 6 months later you buy it on DVD. This is when you look at the time spent playing video games versus cinema, it blows cinema out of all proportion. And finally, interactivity. Xbox Live, and I'm sure Sony will have a very similar setup as well, have approximately 6 million Xbox Live users around the world at the moment. That is a huge online community. There's a lot of discussion at the moment in the media about social networking sites and blogging. Video games provide a huge community where advertisers can quite accurately target media campaigns to hit certain demographics. Specifically, what Massive is doing is we're aggregating together a wide spectrum of video games from the top publishers in the world, from those people who make video games. So at the moment we work with about 40 different publishers in the world. They include EA, Activision, Ubisoft, Konami, for Vendor Universal, pretty much the top 15 video games publishers in the world. We will have 100 titles in the network by the end of 2007. And at the moment, we actively send advertising into the platforms for PC, Xbox 360, and we very much hope to be working across all other platforms in 2007 as well. Video games today are just as easy for a media buyer or planner to purchase as television, radio, print and online, and in some cases easier. You buy a number of impressions across a network. The difference between video games is that you pay for impressions that are seen rather than impressions that are delivered. So one impression is a 10-second view of an advert. That's a cumulative view. So imagine you're racing around a track, a car track, and you see a Coca-Cola ad for 1 second. After 10 rotations of the track, that's cumulatively 10 seconds and therefore one impression. The impression is also measured from a certain size and angle. So the rule of thumb is if you can distinguish the creative and it hits a 10-second threshold, the advertiser is charged as one impression. If you don't hit that 10 seconds threshold and you cannot distinguish the creative, it is not charged as an impression. In terms of the content that we can deliver into video games, and I'll show you some examples in a minute, we can deliver 2D content. So imagine you go to a football match and you see the hoardings and the billboards around the stadium. 3D branded objects, so 1 month you could be using a Peugeot, 1 month you could be driving a Renault. We can change the car every month. 15-second video and audio clips, so a lot of movie studios can advertise their movies in there, 15-second trailers. And then finally, interactive ad units. And I'll show you examples of all of these. Here's an example from Pro Evolution Soccer. You can see the Panasonic hoardings at the bottom. They can be quite easily switched over from McDonald's. A combination of the two, and then change them completely and put in Adidas and Nokia. We can target this by country, so if you're playing in Spain, you see Spanish ads. If you're playing in France, you see French ads. And if you're playing in England, you see English ads. We can do it by time of day and by day of week as well. It's incredibly targeted. What I like about this is you can see on the Adidas logo, in this case the creative, Adidas would have just given us their 3-stripe logo. But you can see there's a bit of mud on the billboard and it looks like it's been smashed up a little. We have an in-house creative services team who amend every single piece of creative according to the environment of the game. The advertising has to be relevant and contextual for the game environment. We're not going to put adverts in Lord of the Rings. Another example. If you're not connected to the internet, this is the truck that you will see when you play Splinter Cell. Imagine Coca-Cola bought a campaign. You connect to the internet, you plug in your 360 or your PC, and this is what you will see. Once again, it makes sense within the environment. We've done a large amount of research about gamers' reactions to this type of advertising. We've done research internally, Nielsen has done research, and several other third parties have done research. Changing creative. Now, in each country, you see the creative in that language. We can also do this by release date. So potentially a film may release in the UK. Warner Brothers run a campaign for 3 weeks before it releases. But in France, it may release 2 weeks later. So they'll run the campaign 3 weeks before the movie releases in France. This is an example from the US with Daimler Chrysler in the video game Desperate Housewives. November, December and January, you come back every month, there is a different car sitting on Wisteria Lane in the video game Desperate Housewives. And then finally, interactive ad units. This is something we're just starting to play around with at the moment, and we're developing different formats for advertising, while simultaneously doing research to test the effectiveness, but more importantly, gamers' reactions to that advertising. And within this game environment, you see the advert for Toyota Yaris. You press the controller or you press the mouse, and it reveals the car image behind it. Likewise, this could be a Coca-Cola ad. You could peel back a coupon, which would give you a short code to get a discount off Coca-Cola in the local supermarket. And this is what I was mentioning before about what we judge to be one impression. So, it has to be a certain size, which is approximately 5% of the screen size. It has to be a certain angle, which once again is approximately 65 degrees. But this can also change dependent on the creative. If you've got a very complex creative, it's going to be more difficult to distinguish exactly what it is, whereas if you simply have a logo, it's going to be easier to work out what the logo is. And finally, the exposure, which, as I said, is a 10-second cumulative view. We recognise that this is a relatively new medium. We've been delivering ads into video games for approximately 2 years. Year 1 was focused on the US, and Year 2 has been focused on Europe. To date, we have about 80 different brands that have brought into the network. They include Coca-Cola, Wrigley, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Warner Brothers, Sony Pictures. Every movie studio practically has brought into the network. So we understand that in order to really take money away from TV dollars and from online money as well, we need to do significant research into this medium to test the effectiveness of the in-game advertising. This is one example of an effectiveness study that we did with a motor oil campaign. The motor oil campaign ran in 12 titles for 8 to 12 weeks. Once again, every single piece of creative was amended by Massive to ensure that it fits well within the video game environment. And here are the results. Demographics, 95% male 13 to 34. There is practically no wastage in this medium at all. Specifically, the motor oil companies, the car companies, the entertainment companies have a huge sort of crossover in terms of the audience that play video games and go and buy the cars and see the movies. And then finally, the brand metrics, which I'm sure many of you will be aware are quite considerable versus other forms of traditional media. Brand favourability, you've got an increase of 14%. Purchase intent, once again, double figures, 11%. And what we call ad likability, 12%. Ad likability is incredibly important for us. We need to ensure that the advertising enhances game realism as opposed to detracts from it. And that's the key message that we get across to gamers. You know, if you're playing a video game, it needs to replicate reality. The way a video game replicates reality is to put real-world advertising within that environment. from a gamer's perspective as well, the costs of developing video games for the next generation machines, for 360, for PS3 and for Wii, is absolutely vast. And by sort of providing incremental revenue to video game publishers and developers, we can ensure that the price of games doesn't skyrocket in line with the cost of development. In terms of the availability of Massive, Massive is available today in every country in Europe, including Spain. And specifically in Spain, we work very closely with the MDAS sales team, who can actively go out and sell Massive today to clients who want to buy in. The turnaround time is very quick. It's approximately 2 to 3 weeks from when someone approaches us and says, I want to buy a campaign, to when it can actively run within the network. And on the creative side, we ask people for various different creative formats. Give us your TV spots, give us your online campaigns, give us your existing outdoor campaigns. With all this material, we will then in turn amend that creative according to the environment of the game. What I can also do is some of the screenshots you've seen today I can provide you if you want to use. Say the Coke ad, for example, on the truck, I can give you a screenshot before without any branding and afterwards with the branding. Analysts have said that the in-game advertising market will be worth $700 million by 2010. Okay. Our aim within Massive and as part of Microsoft is to ensure that within 5 years, video games are a line item on every single person's media planning budget who want to target the 13 to 34 male demographic.
And Massive is a Microsoft agency.
Indeed. Massive was a company that was established in 2002, and it was purchased by the Online Services Group in May 2006.
So what's with Sony PlayStation? What's with Nintendo?
Indeed. At the moment we serve onto PC, Xbox and Xbox 360. The concept of Massive is to serve across as many platforms as possible to create the broadest reach possible. So we very much hope to be working across other next generation consoles as well.
So you're trying to get them into your agency?
Absolutely.
Introduciendo publicidad real, se gana el realismo de cara al jugador. Pero no se corre el riesgo de que pase desapercibido como parte del entorno, como parte del escenario, si no tenga una eficacia real desde el punto de vista comercial. Si no se produzca en venta.
Right, okay. In-game advertising absolutely enhances the reality of the video game. But there's a finite number of brands that can go into a video game environment. We're never going to oversaturate a game with too many adverts. When you play a video game, unlike walking down the street, it's a relatively small screen, and you take note of all the different elements within the screen, whether it's in the center or whether it's around. The prime example is if you're walking through a corridor in Splinter Cell, you want to know if someone's going to shoot you from the right, left, up or down. And therefore you're taking note of all the advertising as well as all the content of the video game. And from the research that we've had to date, as you can see, and I can provide you with some other research studies as well with pleasure, the metrics have increased significantly.
Puesto que se introduce publicidad en los videojuegos, ¿no podrían bajar los precios de estos, ya que el usuario tiene que consumir esa publicidad?
There are a couple of models, business models, whereby people are providing video games free to the market in return for advertising. However, when you look at the AAA titles, and when I say AAA titles, those from the top publishers in the world, such as Need for Speed from EA, Splinter Cell from Ubisoft, Pro Evolution Soccer from Konami, what we're ensuring is that because the development costs are increasing so much, we're ensuring that the prices remain constant and do not increase in line with the development costs.
Se va a investigar sobre introducir publicidad personalizada de acuerdo a cada jugador.
Is there a possibility to use personalized advertising according to the video game?
No, we do not personalise advertising according to the individual gamer. We store no personally identifiable information other than the IP address, as every other sort of internet site does. And we target by IP. We do not use any more personal information than that.
Quería agradecer que hubierais venido, contaros en primicia que ha venido Joshua esta nueva propiedad que vamos a comercializar. Sabéis que antes éramos solo MSN y ahora ya nuestro equipo de ventas comercializa MSN, Windows Live, Massive, nos metemos también en el mundo de los videojuegos y daros las gracias por estar aquí. Gracias a Joshua por haber venido. Sí, porque como os ha contado Joshua, se podrá seleccionar o videojuegos de PC o en Xbox Live, incluso en un futuro pues con PlayStation. Y lo compró Microsoft ya hace unos meses, pero ya ahora mismo un anunciante en España puede contratar un plan, incorporar a su plan de medios. Ellos lo que hacemos es el anunciante, de hecho ya estamos contactando con agencias de medios. Comentan, pues Gillette es el target perfecto, 18-34, mail.